Imagine you're just scrolling through TikTok one evening, maybe laughing at some awkward fails, maybe trying to learn the latest viral dance that's blowing up your feed. You click on a video, just some teenager doing the new hashtag Flash Kick Challenge, and at first it looks like all the others. But then you notice something in the background. Nothing obvious. Nothing flashy. Just something odd. A glimpse of a face. A blurry shape. A doorway slightly ajar. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but somehow it feels off. Now here's where things get insane. Someone else saw that video too, and recognized what most people missed. Within 48 hours, the FBI got involved, a cold case file was reopened, and a decades-old mystery that law enforcement had given up on suddenly exploded back to life. And that's when they made the arrest. All because of one TikTok dance. Now, if you're anything like me, you're probably already asking, how could a dance video lead to a criminal arrest? Who was behind it? What was in that frame that sparked the investigation? And here's the best part. Every question that brought you to this video today, every bit of curiosity that's building in your gut right now, you're going to get the answer. All of it. But not like in a dry news report. You and we're diving into a story that unfolds like a mystery novel, except it's 100% real. I want you to stay with me till the very end because, trust me, the way this story builds up, the moment when everything clicks together, is something you won't want to miss. You'll look at TikTok, social media, maybe even your own digital footprint in a completely different way after this. You see, this isn't just about a viral video. It's about how even the most casual moments we capture, those 30-second dance clips, those background giggles, that blurred figure walking past a hallway, can carry secrets. Sometimes terrifying ones. Sometimes life-changing. And in this case, someone's entire past was hiding in plain sight on your For You page. But here's the wild twist. The person who filmed the video had no clue what they were capturing. And neither did the millions of people who viewed it, liked it, commented "Slay Queen" or "Fire, fire, fire," until a retired detective stumbled across it. Not through TikTok itself, but through his 14-year-old niece who was obsessed with the app. That random scroll turned into a moment that shook an entire family and reopened one of the most haunting, unsolved cases in the state of Missouri. The TikTok creator? Just a 17-year-old girl named Kaylee Simmons from Springfield, Missouri. Cheerleader, straight-A student, with dreams of going into forensic psychology. Ironically enough, she wasn't trying to go viral, but she had been following a trend that was booming on social media. The hashtag Flash Kick Challenge, a high-energy dance that mixed acrobatics with fast-paced hand choreography. This challenge had racked up over 80 million views in less than 2 weeks. Everyone was doing it, high schoolers, influencers, even celebrities. Kaylee filmed her version in her mom's garage, mostly just to send to friends. But the moment she uploaded it publicly, the wheels of fate started turning. Now here's where it gets even more bizarre. In the background of her video, just behind the stacks of holiday storage bins and half-deflated pool floats, a man briefly walks by. His face isn't fully visible. He doesn't stop. He doesn't wave. But something about him stood out to the retired detective. The way he walked. The tattoo on his arm. The lanyard around his neck that was barely visible but clearly marked with a logo he hadn't seen in decades.
It triggered something.
A memory. A case from 1997. A case that had gone cold because the suspect had disappeared, completely off the grid. No fingerprints. No digital trail. Nothing. Until now. Let's pause for a moment. I want you to think about what this means. A decades-old fugitive, hiding in the open, accidentally caught in the background of a dance video. A viral trend that unknowingly exposes a man who thought he had erased every trace of his past. And a teenage girl, unknowingly pulling the thread that would unravel it all. It's the kind of thing you expect to see in a Netflix documentary or a true crime series, not your TikTok feed. But that's the world we live in now, isn't it? A place where content is constant and cameras are everywhere. Where your next scroll might hold more than entertainment. It might hold a clue. And here's where you and I really connect, because this isn't just Kaylee's story or a detective's redemption arc. It's a story about how ordinary people like you and me are now part of a global web where every post, every share, every view might carry more weight than we realize. It's about the intersection of crime and technology, about digital footprints, and how the ghosts of the past aren't just haunting old files, they're showing up in real time. You've probably already started piecing together the possibilities in your head, wondering who that man was, what he did, and how he managed to vanish for so long. But I promise, the truth is far darker and stranger than you're imagining. We're about to get into the part where everything changes. The moment Kaylee's video hit the news. The moment her family found out that the man in their garage wasn't who they thought he was. The moment the police showed up at her door. And most importantly, the moment a nearly 30-year-old secret was exposed to the entire nation. Because what started as a fun challenge ended in handcuffs, a media storm, and the chilling reopening of a crime that many believed would never be solved. Kaylee Simmons had always been the kind of teenager most parents dreamed of raising. Focused, respectful, with an easy smile that made her instantly likable to teachers and friends alike. She had just turned 17 and was deep into her junior year at Glendale High School in Springfield, Missouri, juggling honors classes, varsity cheer practice, and her growing obsession with social media trends. She wasn't trying to become a content creator in the way many teens were. She didn't care much about monetizing or hitting follower milestones. For Kaylee, TikTok was just a creative outlet, a place where she could blow off steam, connect with friends, and have a little fun between the daily grind of essays, exams, and cheer routines. It was her best friend, Maya, who had convinced her to try the hashtag FlashKick challenge in the first place, insisting it was the only trend she hadn't already nailed. They spent a Saturday afternoon rehearsing in Kaylee's garage, laughing between takes, goofing around with filters, and shouting out their favorite creators. It was a normal day. So normal, in fact, that neither of them noticed the figure who passed briefly behind the stacks of boxes. Neither of them even knew someone else had been home. Kaylee's mother, Teresa Simmons, worked double shifts as a nurse at Mercy Hospital and was rarely home before 9 p.m. Her stepfather, Jim, quiet, handy, and a bit of a recluse, mostly kept to the basement where he'd set up a small woodworking shop years ago. Jim had married Teresa when Kaylee was 10. He was the kind of man who said little but always showed up on time: school plays, parent-teacher meetings, birthdays. He never tried to be her father, and Kaylee never really treated him like one, but there was an unspoken peace between them. Jim was just Jim. Predictable. Steady. A little awkward in group settings, but friendly enough with neighbors. The kind of man people didn't really notice. Which is probably why nobody asked too many questions when he moved into town a decade ago and quietly slipped into the rhythm of small-town life. That is, until someone finally noticed what they weren't supposed to. As the hashtag FlashKick challenge picked up steam, Kaylee's video unexpectedly took off. Within a few days, it crossed 500,000 views and made its way into curated TikTok playlists, landing her on the For You pages of strangers across the country. It was around this time that a user by the name of @ColdCaseRewatch, an account known for dissecting true crime clues in pop culture media, commented something that seemed, at first, completely unrelated. Anyone else catch that guy in the back? Something about him looks familiar. The comment was buried under hundreds of "She Ate" and "Queen of Transitions" and might have gone unnoticed if not for the follow-up comment hours later that read, "Pause at 014. Look closely at the left arm. Tattoo matches missing person report from 1997. That one set off a ripple." Unknown to Kaylee, her video had been sent to a small Reddit community focused on unsolved crimes. Screenshots of the blurry man in the background were analyzed, enhanced, and compared against grainy photographs from an old case file involving a man named Dean Willis, who had vanished after being named the prime suspect in the murder of his coworker, a school teacher in St. Louis, back in '97. According to the case notes, now shared in chunks across forums and subreddits, Dean had been last seen wearing a maintenance uniform and had a distinct lanyard from his job, plus a barbed wire tattoo partially wrapping around his left arm. Police had searched for him for years, but he vanished without a trace, and many assumed he'd either died or fled the country. But one retired detective never quite let go of the case. And that man was Rick Halvorson. Rick had left the force 5 years ago, but never stopped tracking cold leads from home. His niece, Brooke was the one who first showed him Kaylee's TikTok video as a joke. She had no idea what she was triggering. The moment Rick saw the figure in the background, saw the slow shuffle of the walk, the curve of the shoulders, and especially that tattoo, something clicked in his memory, like a key turning in a long-forgotten lock. He wasn't 100% certain, not yet, but he was certain enough to send it to a friend who still worked in the missing persons unit. From there, everything accelerated. Quietly, discreetly. Authorities didn't want to alert anyone prematurely. Not until they were sure. Back in Springfield, Kaylee remained oblivious. She was riding the small wave of her video's success and already planning the next trend with Maya. But small details began to shift. Neighbors recalled seeing strange, unmarked cars slowly driving through the neighborhood that week. Jim started disappearing into the garage more often than usual, always locking the door behind him, even when he was just running a quick errand. Teresa mentioned he'd been acting a little more anxious, even snapped at her when she asked about a missing receipt from a hardware store. And then there was the night Kaylee overheard him on the phone late, past midnight, his voice low, urgent. She couldn't make out the words, but it was the first time in years she'd heard panic in his tone. By the time the authorities finally confirmed the tattoos match and issued a quiet alert to local law enforcement, the energy in the Simmons home had already shifted. But there was something else, something nobody had yet connected. 2 weeks prior to uploading the TikTok, Kaylee had found an old lockbox while looking for Christmas decorations. It was wedged behind a pile of unused camping gear and was covered in dust. She had brought it up to her mom, thinking it was hers, but Teresa had no memory of ever seeing it before. Jim, upon seeing it, had gone pale. He claimed it belonged to an old tenant and quickly took it to the garage. She hadn't seen it since. At the time, Kaylee thought nothing of it. But now, looking back, she began to question why a man who never lost his cool had nearly dropped the box trying to snatch it from her hands. Meanwhile, the internet was doing what it does best, spinning theories. Some believed the man in the video wasn't Jim at all, but someone squatting in the Simmons basement without their knowledge. Others pointed fingers at Kaylee's mom, suggesting she had known the truth all along and helped hide her husband's identity. A smaller but louder group speculated that the video was staged from the beginning, a clout-chasing true crime stunt designed to go viral. Theories piled on theories, burying the truth in noise. And somewhere in that chaos, one name surfaced that hadn't been spoken aloud in years: Melissa Drake, the woman Dean Willis had allegedly killed all those years ago. A few old classmates claimed Melissa and Dean had more than just a work relationship. Others said Melissa had secrets of her own, and that Dean may have been framed. Was he a murderer, or just a man running from someone else's crime? The lines were starting to blur. And just as investigators closed in, ready to question the Simmons family and search the garage, Kaylee stumbled upon something else, something buried at the bottom of a dusty file drawer her mother hadn't opened in years. A photograph. One that didn't belong to her family. One that featured a young man who looked a lot like Jim, except the name on the back wasn't Jim. And what was scribbled underneath that name raised even more questions. Because the photo wasn't dated from 1997. It was marked 1993. And the location? A city that had never once been mentioned by her stepfather. And just like that, the mystery deepened. Because maybe Jim wasn't Dean Willis at all. Maybe he was someone else entirely. But if that was true, then where was the real Dean? And who had really been caught on Kaylee's TikTok? What she was about to discover next would tear everything she thought she knew about her family and herself into pieces. Kaylee couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The photo she had found, faded, curling at the corners, with a date that didn't line up with anything her stepfather had ever mentioned, was sitting in her backpack, tucked inside her history notebook where she knew no one would think to look. She hadn't even told Maya about it yet. It was the kind of thing that made her stomach tighten every time she thought about it. The man in the photo looked like Jem, but younger, leaner, and dressed in a style that definitely screamed early 90s. But the part that haunted her the most was the handwriting on the back. It wasn't her mom's, and it wasn't Jim's blocky, mechanical print. It was soft, loopy, and written in red ink that had almost completely faded. It read, "To M, always watching. D." That last initial stuck in her mind like a splinter. It had to mean Dean, right? But then again, if Jim was Dean, why would he leave a note to someone with a signature that only made things more suspicious? The moment she tried to bring it up to her mom, Teresa brushed her off with a half-hearted smile and a distracted nod, barely looking up from her laptop. "Probably just some old stuff from your grandma's house," she said, but her voice carried that same forced brightness Kaylee had only ever heard a few times before, usually when she was hiding something. That's when Kaylee started to dig. She waited until Jim left for a supply run the following Saturday and snuck into the garage, hoping to find the old lockbox he'd taken weeks earlier. It wasn't there. In fact, everything looked too clean, too staged. The clutter that had once filled the corners of the garage was gone, replaced by neatly stacked bins and a cleared workbench. It looked like someone had scrubbed the place down. That was the first real sign that something deeper was happening. And then she noticed it, an empty space on the shelf where an old security camera used to be. It had been there for years, part of a cheap system Jim had installed to monitor the driveway. The camera, the wires, even the bracket that held it, all gone. That same afternoon, she got a text from an unknown number. It read, "Stop looking. You don't know what you're walking into." No name, no context. Just that. She showed it to Maya, whose reaction was immediate. "That's straight up creepy. You need to tell someone." But Kaylee didn't know who she could trust anymore. Her mom was acting weird. Her stepdad might be a wanted fugitive. The local police? Not exactly eager to listen to a teenager waving around an old photograph and some internet theories. Even her teachers were starting to treat her differently. Whispers in the hallway, classmates giving her those curious, sidelong glances. Her TikTok fame had gone from exciting to suffocating almost overnight. And things got worse when she checked her video again. The original upload, the one that had gone viral, was gone. Deleted. No warning. No strike notice from TikTok. Just gone. Like it had never existed. She hadn't taken it down. She was sure of it. But now, the one piece of footage that might have proved everything was missing. Her backup? Corrupted. The file wouldn't open, showing nothing but a black screen and static. Maya offered to help her recover it, but even she couldn't make it work. They tried everything, even uploaded it to a Google Drive to see if any tools could restore the file. Nothing. Like someone had scrubbed it remotely. The implications of that terrified Kaylee. Who would go that far to erase a video from both the internet and her own phone? Unless someone was watching her a lot closer than she thought. Then came the email. Buried deep in her inbox, marked as spam, was a message with no sender name, just the subject line. "You think this started with your video? Look again." Attached was a single image, a screenshot from what appeared to be a security camera feed. It wasn't from her garage. It wasn't even from her neighborhood. It was from a convenience store dated 6 months earlier, showing the same man, her stepfather, or someone who looked exactly like him, standing near a payphone. That alone was strange, but what was even stranger was the fact that he wasn't alone. Next to him was a woman. She was facing away from the camera, but her profile was just visible enough to spark something in Kaylee's memory. She looked almost like the woman from the old case file Rick Halvorson had referenced on Reddit. Melissa Drake. But how was that possible? Melissa was supposed to be dead. That was the whole reason the case had gone cold. So, who was the woman in the footage? Was the case built on a lie? Or had someone gone through a lot of trouble to fake something that didn't need to be faked? Maya, usually the skeptic of the two, started to believe that something far bigger was at play. They started piecing together everything they knew, every offhand comment Jim had made, every strange gap in his backstory, every year unaccounted for between his supposed move to Missouri and the date the case was closed. Nothing lined up cleanly. He had no real social media history, no relatives ever mentioned, and barely any photos older than 5 years. He had always been a ghost, friendly, helpful, but never open. Even worse, when they asked Teresa directly where she met him, she hesitated before saying, "At a medical conference," and then quickly changed the subject. Teresa wasn't in the medical field when they met. She hadn't even started nursing school yet. Kaylee knew that. Everything around her was beginning to feel staged, like she was walking through a version of her life built on half-truths. And then the final crack came during a chance run-in with Mr. Hargrove, her elderly neighbor who had lived next door for decades. He casually mentioned, while raking leaves, that Jim reminded him of a man who used to live 2 streets over, years ago, who vanished after a house fire no one ever explained. "We always thought it was an accident," he said. "But I remember that guy had the same limp. Same truck, too. Strange how people disappear, huh?" Kaylee couldn't sleep that night. She stared at the old photograph, the corrupted video, the cryptic messages, all pointing to something darker. And just as she was about to finally tell Maya everything, her phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. A body had been discovered near a dried-up creek bed 2 counties away. The authorities hadn't released a name, just a vague description. But Kaylee knew. She didn't know how, but she knew. The part that chilled her the most wasn't that someone had turned up dead. It was who the police said had made the anonymous tip. The caller had used her name. Kaylee sat frozen, her phone still in her hand as the screen dimmed. She hadn't moved since the notification came through, her brain spinning in 1,000 directions at once. How could someone have used her name to report a body? She hadn't called anyone. She hadn't told anyone outside of Maya what she'd found. Her voice was never recorded. Her phone hadn't even made a single call that entire day. And yet, someone had impersonated her. Someone wanted the police to think she was involved. Her first instinct was to text Maya, but she stopped herself. What if they were listening? What if every message she sent, every word she typed, was being tracked or recorded? The idea was absurd, paranoid even, but nothing in her life felt normal anymore. And then came the second text. Not to her this time, but to Maya. They were sitting across from each other in Kaylee's bedroom the next afternoon, trying to piece together what to do next, when Maya's phone vibrated. She picked it up, squinting at the unknown number, her face changing as she read. "Someone just sent me a screenshot," she whispered. It's a picture of us. Yesterday. Outside the Walgreens. Look." Kaylee leaned in, her breath catching. The image showed the 2 of them walking side by side, Maya holding a soda, Kaylee looking over her shoulder, and it was taken from a distance, like a zoomed-in shot from across the parking lot. There was no message attached. No explanation. Just the image and a timestamp. It was clear, deliberate, and terrifying. Someone was following them. Someone was watching. Suddenly, Kaylee wasn't sure who she could trust anymore, not even Maya. She wanted to believe her best friend was on her side, but a small part of her couldn't ignore the timing. Maya had always been tech-savvy. She knew how to hide messages, how to access metadata, how to wipe a phone clean. What if she wasn't just helping to uncover the truth? What if she had a reason to keep Kaylee close? As much as she hated herself for thinking it, the fear crept in like a slow poison, dull but persistent. And then there was the deeper fear, that this was never just about Jim. That she had stumbled into something far bigger, and the clues she had been chasing were only the beginning of a story that stretched back further than she ever imagined. The police hadn't released the identity of the body, but rumors were already spreading online. Some users on Reddit claimed it was a woman's remains, found wrapped in what looked like layers of black tarp and buried shallow enough to suggest someone wanted it discovered. Others speculated it was a staged find, a warning to someone else involved. That's when a new theory gained traction, the possibility that Jim, if that was even his real name, wasn't running from a crime, but from a group of people tied to it. Maybe he was never the killer. Maybe he knew who was. And maybe he'd been hiding not just to protect himself, but to protect Kaylee and her mom. And then, the twist no one expected. A package arrived at their front door 2 days later. No return address, no postal markings, just a small brown box placed carefully on the welcome mat. Kaylee's mom found it first and handed it to Kaylee without saying a word. Inside, wrapped in layers of newspaper dated from 1997, was a cassette tape. Not a flash drive. Not a DVD. An old-school, plastic audio cassette. Alongside it was a torn scrap of paper with 3 words. Play it alone. There was no way to know who had sent it or why, but Kaylee didn't have the luxury of ignoring it. She scrambled to find a cassette player, eventually borrowing one from Mr. Hargrove, who still kept one in his garage alongside his vintage tools. She waited until the house was empty. Her mom had gone in for night shift. Jim hadn't come home since the news broke about the body. Alone in her room, she inserted the tape, heart pounding. What played wasn't what she expected. No confession. No clues. Just a single audio recording, a woman crying. Not sobbing, but low, broken weeping. Then a voice, faint, almost muffled, whispering something she couldn't make out. She replayed it again and again, straining to understand the words. And finally, on the fifth replay, she caught it. The voice said, "They know you remember." Over and over, like a chant. "They know you remember." And suddenly, something inside Kaylee snapped into place. Not a memory, exactly, but a feeling. Like her body remembered something her mind had buried. What if this didn't start with a TikTok video? What if it started years ago, and she had been too young to understand? As she sat there in the growing dark, trying to breathe past the panic, her phone lit up with another alert, this time from her old iCloud account, one she hadn't used in years. An old photo album had been accessed remotely. The album's title? Camp Willow, Summer 13. She hadn't thought about that camp in forever. Not since the summer her mother pulled her out halfway through the session, with no warning.
She was only 5 then.
She barely remembered anything except the lake. And a counselor who disappeared one night. And just like that, a second story began to unfold. One that connected her stepfather to a past she didn't know she had, and a crime no one had ever solved. The feeling of being watched had shifted from a lingering unease to a constant, choking presence that hung over Kaylee like a shadow she couldn't shake. It wasn't just the anonymous texts or the unsettling photos anymore. It was the sense that reality itself was bending around her, warping her perception of safety, of normal life. Things she once trusted, her home, her friendships, even her own memories, were unraveling. And when Maya didn't show up to school the next morning, Kaylee's world tilted completely off its axis. There was no text, no snap, no reply to DMs.
Nothing.
At first, she assumed Maya had just stayed home sick or skipped class, overwhelmed by everything they were digging into. But when she tried to call her during lunch, the number had been disconnected. Not silenced. Not ignored. Disconnected. It was like she had vanished. Panic gripped Kaylee in a way she'd never felt before. She left school early and biked to Maya's house, heart pounding with every push of the pedals, convincing herself it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe Maya's phone was broken. Maybe her parents had taken her on a surprise trip to calm her nerves. But when she got there, the house was quiet. Eerily so. The driveway was empty, the blinds drawn, and a yellow slip of paper was taped to the front door. Eviction notice. Kaylee stood frozen, rereading it 3 times before the meaning sank in. Maya hadn't just disappeared. Her entire family had packed up and vanished without a trace, and the eviction was dated 3 days ago. That meant Maya had been hiding it. Or worse, she hadn't known it was coming either. She tried calling Maya's mom's workplace but was met with a curt reply, "She no longer works here." When Kaylee asked for a forwarding number, the line went dead. There was no goodbye, no trail, nothing. And that's when the fear shifted from confusion to raw, gut-wrenching terror. Someone had taken them, or forced them to leave. And whatever they were caught in wasn't just some buried identity or forgotten crime. This was deliberate, organized. Someone had power and reach. As she biked home in a haze, she noticed something else, an old blue sedan following her from a distance. It wasn't close enough to alarm most people, but it stayed in her rear view for every turn, every stop, even when she pulled into a gas station and lingered near the entrance. When she stepped behind a vending machine, pretending to text, she caught a glimpse of the driver through the reflection in the glass. Sunglasses, hat pulled low, no expression. Not a neighbor. Not a local. And as soon as she made eye contact through the reflection, the car pulled away. She waited 15 minutes before getting back on her bike, but the sense of being hunted didn't leave her. It settled in her bones. Back home, she found her mom uncharacteristically anxious, pacing the kitchen with her phone in one hand and a trembling mug of coffee in the other. Kaylee asked if she was okay, and Teresa quickly forced a smile and said, "Just tired." But Kaylee saw the text message glowing on the screen before her mom flipped it over. It read, "Tell her to stop. Before it's too late." That night, Kaylee couldn't sleep. The walls of her room felt thinner, like sound could travel through them too easily. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside, made her flinch. And sometime around 2 a.m., the power went out. Total silence. Then, moments later, the static sound of her old cassette player clicked on by itself. It shouldn't have even had power. She hadn't touched it since the recording of The Crying Woman. The tape wasn't in it, but the device still turned on. And out of that static came a single voice, raspy, male, and barely above a whisper. "You've already seen too much, Kaylee." She slammed the power off and yanked the cord from the wall, her breath catching as tears pricked her eyes. That voice wasn't just threatening. It was personal. It knew her name. It knew her fear. And she realized in that moment that this wasn't about solving a mystery anymore. It was about surviving it. The next morning, her mom was gone. No note. No message. Her car was still in the driveway, but her purse, her phone, and her work ID were missing. Kaylee called the hospital. They said Teresa hadn't shown up for her shift. Hadn't called. Hadn't responded. The nurses sounded concerned, but not surprised. "She's been distracted lately," one of them said. Said something about needing to go back and fix what she never finished. That's when it hit her. Teresa knew something too. Maybe she always had. Maybe she had been protecting Kaylee from something, someone for years. Kaylee checked the envelope her mom always kept taped to the underside of her dresser drawer, the one labeled "Emergency Only." It was gone. But in its place, taped to the inside of the drawer, was a single photo she'd never seen before. It was of her at Camp Willow, standing near the lake. She must have been 5. But that wasn't what froze her. In the background, blurry but unmistakable, was Jim. Younger. Dressed like a counselor. Smiling. She had no memory of him being there.
None. But the photo didn't lie.
And that raised a terrifying new question. How long had he been watching her? Kaylee stared at the photo until her fingers began to tremble. The more she looked at it, the more her chest tightened with the terrifying realization that this wasn't just a coincidence or a trick of memory. It wasn't just that Jim had once worked at the camp. It was the way he looked at the camera. Not like someone caught in the background of a stranger's photo, but like someone posing, watching, aware. Her entire childhood, she had accepted that Jim came into their lives after her father died, that he and her mom met randomly at a grief counseling event. But now the timeline didn't add up. If he was at Camp Willow when she was 5, that meant he had entered her life years before she thought. Which meant none of this was an accident. He hadn't just met her mother. He had chosen her. Kaylee's mind raced through every memory she could summon, scrambled flashes of that summer at camp. There was a night she vaguely remembered waking up outside her cabin, confused, barefoot, and cold, her counselor frantically searching for her. There was a boy who used to sneak her juice boxes from the staff kitchen, who said he liked her laugh and made her promise to keep secrets. And there was the whispering by the lake, half asleep, half dreamt. Until now, none of it had felt connected. But it was.
And it all led back to Jim.
That night, she broke into the one place she had avoided ever since the body was found, the shed. The cops had been there already. They'd taped it off, done their sweep, but there was something about the way her mother always avoided going near it, something about the way Jim used to keep the door double-locked even though there was nothing valuable inside. Kaylee waited until after midnight, heart pounding in her ears, and slipped out with a flashlight. What she found inside wasn't blood or tools, or any of the horrible things she'd feared. It was far worse in its quiet simplicity, a locked filing cabinet that had somehow survived the police search. And inside that, folders.
Dozens of them.
All labeled with names. Some she didn't recognize. Others sent shivers through her spine. One read, Maya Bennett. Another, Teresa J. Another, simply, K. And beneath that stack was an envelope filled with photos. Some were recent, grainy surveillance-style shots of her and Maya at school, at Starbucks, at her house. but others were old. Polaroids. Children lined up at camp, smiling. Names scrawled on the back. One stood out. Lily Rayburn, do not contact. Kaylee didn't know why the name felt familiar until she remembered the newspaper clipping she'd seen weeks ago, buried in a Reddit thread about local cold cases. Lily Rayburn had gone missing from Camp Willow in 2013. Her case was still unsolved. Her hands shaking, Kaylee took photos of everything and shoved the envelope into her backpack. But as she turned to leave, she heard a voice from the darkness outside. You weren't supposed to find that. Jim stepped into the doorway, his eyes darker than she'd ever seen them, not angry, but sad, like someone watching something they tried to protect fall apart. I didn't want this for you, he said, and Kaylee's entire body locked up. I kept it from you, because it was the only way I knew how to keep you safe. She wanted to scream, to run, to call the police, but her voice failed her. Safe from what? She finally managed to whisper. Jim's expression shifted, just slightly. From her, he said. Your mother. For a second, it didn't make sense. But then the threads began to pull together in Kaylee's mind like a puzzle she had been solving backwards. The late-night shifts. The secret hospital conversations. The coded warnings she'd overheard. Her mother hadn't just been running from something. She had been erasing it. Bit by bit. Memory by memory. And the most horrifying part? Kaylee wasn't sure who to believe anymore. Because Jim wasn't accusing her mother of covering up a crime. He was accusing her of starting it. He pulled something from his pocket, a worn photo, and held it out. It was a girl, about 16, lying on the ground by the lake, eyes closed, bruises on her wrists. She wasn't the first, he said quietly. And she won't be the last. Kaylee's stomach twisted. She didn't want to look, but she had to. On the back of the photo was a date, July 2003, and a name. Teresa Jameson. Her mother. Not the photographer. The suspect. Kaylee didn't sleep that night. After what Jim revealed, after seeing that photo with her own mother's name tied to it, her reality fractured into pieces that no longer fit together. The woman who had raised her, tucked her into bed, held her through every nightmare, was now entangled in something so dark, so chilling, it made Kaylee question whether she had ever truly known her at all. But what made it worse was the silence. Her mother was still missing. Not a word. Not a clue. Just that single picture, and Jim's haunting voice repeating the same words. She wasn't the first. Kaylee tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Teresa's name had been on that photo for some other reason. But the dates matched. The place matched. And when she finally gathered the courage to open the envelope that Jim had left her before disappearing again, what she found inside shattered whatever hope she had left of this being some tragic misunderstanding. Inside were old medical records, files from a psychiatric facility that had long since been shut down. Teresa Jameson's name was printed clearly at the top. Notes scribbled in ink hinted at episodes of paranoia, identity delusions, and violent outbursts. There were redacted sections, entire blocks of text blacked out. But one line stood out, clear as day. Subject shows advanced dissociation and a deep-seated belief that she must protect the girl at all costs. Kaylee didn't know if the girl was her or someone else. All she knew was that her mother had been hiding a past so completely, so violently, that she had rewritten herself to survive it. But then came the real twist. That night, Kaylee received a private message through her burner TikTok account, the one she and Maya used when they started investigating the original viral video. It was from a user with no followers, no profile picture, no history. Just a video. It wasn't the camp footage. It was footage from inside her house. Dated 3 nights ago. It showed her sleeping. And in the doorway, watching her, was her mother. No movement. Just standing there. Watching. And then, in a hoarse whisper barely picked up by the microphone, her mother's voice said, "She can't know what she is." That was the moment Kaylee broke. She dropped the phone and sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, shaking uncontrollably. Whatever this was, whatever she was, had been buried for years, and now it was coming out piece by piece, dragging her into a nightmare that blurred the lines between victim and accomplice, between daughter and experiment. The next day, a message arrived at school, delivered by the principal, who seemed uneasy and unsure. A handwritten note, and signed, with one sentence that made her stomach churn. "Meet me where it all began. Come alone, or more will disappear." It was taped to a page from an old camp brochure, Camp Willow, the place where the first body was found, the place Kaylee had blocked from her memory. She didn't know what terrified her more, that someone was threatening her, or that she felt compelled to go. She tried calling the police, but the moment she mentioned Camp Willow, the line went dead. Literally dead. Her phone powered down by itself and wouldn't turn back on for hours. She even tried to tell her guidance counselor, but the second she said the words, "My mom is missing," the counselor changed the subject, eyes darting toward a nearby security camera. Something bigger was at play. Something institutional. Something watching. And then came the impossible choice. That night, another message came, this time, left as a voicemail on the landline at her house. A voice distorted with static, untraceable, speaking with a kind of authority that felt absolute. "You go to Camp Willow alone," it said, "and you'll get the answers. But if you speak again, if you involve anyone else, the girl in the video won't be the last." Then it paused, and added, "Choose truth. Or choose safety." Kaylee sat alone in her room, gripping the photo of her mother and the mystery girl by the lake. Every instinct pulled her to walk away, to leave it all behind, to run. But deep inside, she knew that running wouldn't save her. Because the truth wasn't just hiding in Camp Willow. It was hiding inside her. And someone or something was desperate to keep it buried. Kaylee knew something was wrong the moment she stepped off the bus just outside the crumbling gates of Camp Willow. The air felt heavier there, like it carried too many secrets, too many forgotten screams woven into the soil beneath her feet. The place had been abandoned for years, left to rot with its shattered windows and graffiti-covered cabins, but somehow, it looked exactly the same. That was the most unsettling part. It didn't look old. It looked preserved, like someone had been keeping it that way on purpose. As she walked down the overgrown path toward the main lodge, flashlight shaking in her grip, a single thought pulsed through her mind louder than her footsteps. She's not alone. What started as a search for truth had spiraled into something massive, something far beyond her missing mother, beyond the body found in the woods, beyond the creepy messages and security footage. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about them. All of them. The kids who'd gone missing, the names on those folders, the camp counselors whose records vanished after 2003. She had started putting it together only days earlier, after noticing that the people connected to Camp Willow all had something in common. They had no digital presence. No Facebook. No driver's licenses. Some didn't even appear on public records. It was like they'd been wiped clean. Erased. And the more she dug, the more she realized someone had been doing it systematically for decades. A whole network. Not just one person. Kaylee had barely made it to the fire pit when she heard footsteps behind her. Fast, heavy, deliberate. She spun around, heart in her throat, only to come face to face with Maya. But something was off. Maya's eyes were red-rimmed, not from tears, but from lack of sleep or fear. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. "What are you doing here?" Kaylee asked, stunned. Maya hesitated. "I couldn't let you come alone." Then she added, almost in a whisper, "I got the same message." Before Kaylee could even process that, more figures emerged from the trees. 2 others she recognized from school, both quiet loners who'd barely spoken in class, but now, their presence made sense. Each of them held the same look of grim recognition. "He told us to meet here," one of them said, nodding toward the lodge. "Said we were part of it too." That's when Kaylee's phone buzzed, even though she had no service. One video. No sender. It was a live feed. Inside the lodge. Her mother was there. Not tied up. Not panicked.
Calm.
Standing in front of a projector, talking to someone off camera. The feed cut out after just 10 seconds, but it was enough to send Kaylee sprinting toward the door. What she found inside shattered her completely. A circle of chairs. all occupied. Adults. Teenagers. A projector displaying old footage. Kids at camp. Activities. Swimming.
Archery.
But something else too. Flash frames of therapy sessions. Electrodes. Children screaming. On the far wall was a whiteboard with 2 words written in red. Control group. And there, sitting calmly like it was a parent-teacher meeting, was Miss Holloway, Kaylee's English teacher. She didn't look surprised to see her. "I was wondering how long it would take," she said softly. "You always were the quickest to see through the noise." Kaylee didn't understand. "What is this?" she snapped, but her voice cracked under the pressure. Holloway looked at her with pity. "It's a project, dear. One your mother helped build. A government initiative. Psychological conditioning. Behavioral reprogramming. Camp Willow was one of the test sites. And you? You were our most promising subject." That's when the betrayal hit. Maya didn't flinch. She didn't even seem surprised. And slowly, Kaylee turned to her best friend, searching her face for answers. But Maya couldn't meet her eyes. "I didn't know at first," she whispered. "They told me I was helping you, watching out for signs. But when you started remembering things, when the dream started again, they said if I didn't report it, they'd shut me down too." Kaylee staggered back. "Shut you down," she repeated. Maya nodded slowly, a tear running down her cheek. "I was part of it too, Kaylee. My parents enrolled me after my brother died. I was already conditioned by the time we met. Everything, our friendship, our sleepovers, even the TikTok challenge, they weren't accidents. They were triggers." The room spun. Kaylee's breath grew shallow. This wasn't just a mystery. It was a full-blown psychological operation. A behavioral experiment that had never truly ended. The camp hadn't been closed because of budget cuts.
It had gone underground.
Shifted platforms.
Evolved.
From physical spaces to digital ones. From campfires to TikTok dances. Viral trends as behavioral triggers. The missing kids weren't just missing, they were test subjects.
Control failures.
And Kaylee? She wasn't just uncovering the conspiracy. She was the conspiracy. The last thing she heard before she collapsed to her knees was Miss Holloway saying softly, "Now that you know, there's only one way forward. Rejoin the program. Or be erased." Kaylee didn't remember standing up. Her legs moved on instinct, a final surge of something raw and primal surging through her bloodstream as she backed away from the circle of chairs, from Miss Holloway's cold eyes, from Maya's tearful guilt. Her pulse thundered in her ears, not from fear now, but from the realization that she had been fighting a ghost war her entire life. That every relationship, every memory, every truth she clung to had been twisted and shaped by people who saw her not as a daughter, or a friend, or even a person, but as data, as a living experiment. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Why me?" But no one answered. They didn't need to, because the answer was already there, painted on every wall of that lodge, echoing in the footage that played on repeat behind them. She was never Kaylee by accident.
She was built for this.
The projector flickered again, and now it was showing something different. Security cam footage from over the years, carefully archived, all of it leading to one horrifying pattern. The same girls, same choreography, different states, different names, same movements. It was the TikTok dance that had gone viral, the one that started this entire descent. But now, it wasn't cute or catchy, it was chilling. Frame by frame, the dance unlocked memories buried deep, movements used as neurological cues to awaken parts of the brain sealed off during childhood. And the horrifying part? It worked. That dance had reactivated dozens of former subjects. Kaylee wasn't the only one unraveling. The challenge had gone viral not because of music or trends, but because it was designed to. It was planted.
A test.
As realization crashed into her, Holloway stepped forward, voice low, controlled. "You're not broken, Kaylee. You're evolving. You were the first one to survive, full conditioning without regression.
You're the key.
This was never about your mother.
It was always about you.
And now you can either burn the past down or lead the next phase." Kaylee wanted to scream.
To run.
But she stood frozen, the weight of every manipulated moment bearing down on her shoulders. Then the air shifted. A high-pitched whine filled the room, just loud enough to sting the edges of her thoughts. Everyone else winced, clutched their heads. The projector screen glitched. The lights flickered. And then a voice came through the speaker system, old and familiar. It was her mother. Kaylee, listen to me. I didn't run. I went back in. For you. They think I'm dead. But I'm not. I'm upstairs. Kaylee's eyes snapped up to the rafters. The lodge had a second level. She bolted before anyone could react, feet pounding against the wood stairs, the old boards groaning under the weight of urgency. Behind her, chaos erupted. The high-pitched frequency intensified. The others in the room screamed. Someone knocked over the projector. Then came the sounds of a struggle, but Kaylee didn't look back. Upstairs, the hallway was pitch black. Doors lined the walls, numbered in fading paint. Room 6 was open. Inside, her mother sat hunched in a chair, her arms bandaged, her eyes sunken but alert. They didn't kill me, Teresa whispered. They rebooted me, but they didn't know I left a backup. Kaylee stared in disbelief. A what? Her mother's hand trembled as she pulled out an old camcorder, dusty but intact. This is the original. The first proof. What they did to us. It was supposed to be destroyed. But I hid it. You need to get it out. Kaylee took the camcorder, her fingers numb. Downstairs, footsteps thundered. Someone was coming. Holloway?
Maya?
Or someone worse. Her mother reached forward, pulling Kaylee close. I'm sorry I lied. I didn't protect you from the truth. But now you can end it. Run. But Kaylee didn't run. She turned, walked back downstairs, and stepped into the room with the camcorder raised high, red light blinking. Smile, she said, pressing record as Miss Holloway froze. You just went live. The broadcast hit instantly. The lodge's hotspot, used to monitor subjects remotely, fed the signal straight into the cloud. Within minutes, the footage was everywhere. Reddit, TikTok, YouTube. Real-time exposure. The conspiracy unraveling faster than they could silence it. Faces flashed. Names were tagged. Public outrage ignited like wildfire. And yet, just when Kaylee thought it was over, Maya stepped forward and did something she didn't expect. She smiled. Not the sad, broken smile of a friend caught in a lie, but something cold.
Calculated.
You think this stops it? She said calmly. This was phase 1. You just launched phase 2. The screen behind her lit up again. Dozens of live feeds. Kids across the country. All dancing. Same song. Same moves. Same dead-eyed expression. Kaylee felt the camcorder slip from her fingers. The truth hadn't ended the program. It had accelerated it. And then the screen went black. The storm didn't break that night, not in the way Kaylee had expected. There were no helicopters, no agents bursting through the doors, no dramatic arrests captured on live TV. Instead, the world responded the way it often does to the uncomfortable truth, by arguing with itself. The footage from the camcorder went viral in hours, dissected by influencers, podcasters, and TikTok sleuths who debated its authenticity. Hashtags trended globally. Hashtag Camp Willow Files. Hashtag Mind Control Exposed. Hashtag TikTok Experiment. Conspiracy forums exploded with activity while mainstream media cautiously skirted around the topic, labeling it a psychological hoax, a social experiment gone wrong, a viral deepfake orchestrated by hackers. But even as the narrative splintered across platforms, one thing remained undeniable. Something real had been exposed, and the cracks in the facade were no longer so easy to ignore. People recognized faces from the footage. Old camp photos were posted. Survivors began stepping forward anonymously, whispering memories that had haunted them for years but never made sense, until now. Kaylee never returned to school. Not in any traditional sense. After Camp Willow, after the footage, after her mother disappeared again, this time for good, Kaylee vanished too. Some said she changed her name. Others claimed she was taken by the same group she exposed. But those who looked closely, those who really paid attention, began to notice patterns. A new user account would pop up every few weeks, posting strange short videos. Not flashy or viral, just subtle clips.
Static.
Old camp badges. Morse code and subtitles. Blink and you miss it footage of familiar locations. A digital breadcrumb trail. And then they'd disappear again. Deleted.
Gone.
As if erased on purpose. As if someone out there was still trying to guide people toward the full truth without getting caught. In the months that followed, the investigation stalled. There were too many missing files, too many people either silenced or scared to speak. Ms. Holloway vanished the night of the live stream. Maya resurfaced in a rehab facility, claiming psychological trauma and denying any involvement. The lodge at Camp Willow mysteriously burned down 2 weeks later, officially listed as an accident caused by a squatter's faulty generator, though locals swore they saw military trucks in the woods that same night. The last surviving physical evidence of the program turned to ash, leaving only digital echoes behind. But something changed in the public. Parents started paying closer attention. People began questioning viral trends more deeply. Challenges were no longer just entertainment. They were studied, picked apart, examined for hidden patterns. Universities launched research into cognitive influence via social media. Lawmakers proposed bills around data manipulation and mental conditioning. The conversation had begun. Maybe the truth hadn't exploded into the open like a bomb, but it had seeped in like water through a crack in the foundation. Slow, quiet, unstoppable. As for Kaylee, the last confirmed sighting was from a traffic cam in Colorado, just a blurry frame of a girl who looked like her, walking alone on a mountain road, a flash drive hanging from a lanyard around her neck. What was on it? No one knows. Maybe the final piece. Maybe nothing. But some say that's exactly how she wanted it. That after years of being used, watched, conditioned, she finally took control of the story. Not for fame. Not for revenge. But for choice. Because that's what the whole thing had been about from the beginning. Not mind control. Not conspiracy. Consent. The ability to choose your life instead of having it written for you by strangers behind closed doors. And maybe that's why her story stuck with people. Not just because it was terrifying, but because deep down it didn't feel like fiction. It felt possible. Too close to how things already are. It made people look at their screens differently. Made them pause before joining the next viral challenge or downloading the latest trending app. Made them ask one simple question they hadn't asked in years. Am I in control? And that question, quiet, lingering, dangerous, is the real ending to Kaylee's story. Or maybe the beginning of everyone else's.